Welcome to another episode of Home Away from Home. Today I'm soaking up the breathtaking beauty of the Swiss Alps at the stunning Waldhaus Sils. Nestled between two shimmering lakes, this charming hotel is a hidden gem with a legendary history. Join my family and me as we explore this winter wonderland by sleigh, skis, and more. This historic escape has been family-owned for many generations, offering classic cuisine and timeless comforts. With ski slopes just minutes away and a luxurious spa to unwind in, there's something for everyone here. So grab your jacket and let's make some unforgettable memories in the Alps.
Hello, thank you. Great, this is Grace. She's very happy to be here.
We are happy that you're here too. Hello, Grace.
Thank you. So I think we're in the tower room.
Yes,
is that what it's called?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Have a good day. See you later. Bye.
Come on. Whoa. Wow, James. What do you think? Isn't it beautiful? Now this is a pretty room. This is the tower suite that has 6 beautiful windows, and the view is not only of the gorgeous Swiss Alps, but also views facing north and south, and you can see 2 lakes when it's not covered in snow. Come take a look at this view. We just heard church bells ringing. It's just like walking into the sound of music or something. And you can hear birds chirping. It's pretty idyllic. So they've got this little writing desk here with an assortment of paper goods, including these great postcards. Just like the view is unbelievable. And this hotel has been owned and operated by the same family since 1908. And Urs Kienberger is one of these gentlemen. He wrote a book about the family history, about the hotel, and we're gonna meet him in just a little bit. He's a really, really wonderful man. And look, it appears as if they have their own newspaper of some sort. I can't read it, so I'm not sure what it says, but that's fun. One of the things I love about this room is the decor. You've got this beautiful, like mustard colored fabric on the wall, and then this gorgeous molding with all of this detail, this kind of elaborate chandelier, and not to mention the fabulous window treatments with the blue. It just all comes together so nicely. You really feel like you're sort of in a home and not really a hotel. Look at the view that you get from the tub. Whoa. When you walk into this hotel, it sort of has this throwback feel of another era. You almost feel like you're walking into a Wes Anderson movie in the best way possible. They don't try to be trendy, they don't try to be cool, but it just has this feeling of, I don't know, sort of like chic, and they've got sort of their own unique style, and it's a very cool place, and it almost feels like a hidden gem. People kept asking us, how did you find out about us? How did you find out about us? And I think it's maybe a well-kept secret for Americans, but certainly not for Europeans. We met up with one of my husband's friends from college here, and in fact, his dad used to come to this hotel 50 years ago. So you have generations and generations of people who keep coming to this place because it's so special. And I think, Grace, you celebrated your 6-month birthday here, didn't you? And are we gonna come back someday? Are we gonna come back someday when you can actually walk and ski? She hasn't done much except go to the kids club and spit up all over Mom, right? What else have you done? But she loves actually looking out the window. I think she finds it really calming. James really wants a lollipop, which we're about to go get him. But in the meantime, I wanted to point out the beautiful fresh flowers they have all over the hotel. It's almost the end of the ski season here in Switzerland, and spring is about to bloom. So these are all sort of locally sourced flowers, which are just stunning. Look at these. Come on, James. Whoa. What tart would you like?
Tart.
There's no shortage of desserts at this place. I can't pronounce these names, but it doesn't matter because they're just, you can't go wrong with any of them.
Hello, my name is Urs Kienberger. I'm fourth generation Waldhaus. The Waldhaus was built by the parents of my grandmother, and it opened 116 years ago in 1908. And we're still here, fortunately, thanks to the guests. I can tell you two things here. This is our bar, where the music also plays in the evening, and some people dance. But there are two things to say about the Waldhaus. One is, it's not all that big. We have about 145 rooms and suites. So in New York, it will probably be a boutique hotel. The name Waldhaus just means house in the woods. Wald is the woods in German, because every time you look out, you will see the forest. We are in a small town, so we're not at the center of things. We are about 7 miles from St. Moritz. Nietzsche was here in the 1880s. That was before the Waldhaus existed. And he came here for, I think, 8 summers. He spent his whole summers here. He just rented a little room in a modest house in town. So it's, on one level, a bit of an intellectual place. On the other level, a bit of a family place. And there's a nice tension between the two. I said that the hotel wasn't such a big place. At the moment we have about 200 guests. It can go as high as maybe 280 if there are a lot of children and families. Now we're not quite full. On the other hand, we have all these spaces that are really there for people to enjoy and to live with. We haven't made them all economically viable. It's not all turned into boutiques or gourmet restaurants or conference rooms or rooms for functions, but it's really there for people to enjoy, for living, and not just for representation. The book that I carry around, that's really, in a way, it is our story. A couple of years ago, in 2019, we kind of made our own anniversary. It was 111 years, 111, since the opening of the hotel. And we decided that we would really celebrate that as if it was a centennial or a bicentennial. We didn't have the confidence that we would still be around when the hotel turns 200. And one of the things we did was that we published our own book. I mostly wrote it myself. And it's not just a public relations exercise, it's really an attempt to tell in a differentiated way what happened in those years and what the hotel is and how it came about. I have come to see more and more that many things in the world, many good things, only came about because of incomplete information. If our ancestors in 1908 had known all the troubles and all the crises that would follow, they would never have built, because basically what they did was irresponsible. You know, there was 1914, World War I, that lasted for 4 years, and it was a disaster for the hotel. Switzerland wasn't in the war, but of course very few people came. Then there were the early 20s, which were a difficult economic time. There were the 1930s with the Great Depression. There was World War II in 1939 for 6 years. So basically, if they had known what was going to happen, they shouldn't have done it. But it's a good thing they didn't know. This is our little restaurant. I said that it wasn't all turned into restaurants, but we do have restaurants, of course. This room here has its history too. When the hotel was built, the style of it as a whole, that's just how grand hotels looked 120 years ago. But a short time later, people started to become very critical of it because they said, this doesn't have anything to do with the mountains. By now, I should add, it really is integrated into the mountains. It has become a part of the history of the place. But in any case, a generation or two after it was opened, people thought that what they should really have built is something like what you see behind me, meaning in the local alpine style. We're like a farming family or maybe a circus family, meaning there are a lot of relations who also were in hotels. And this was the father of my great-grandfather. So the father of my great-grandmother founded the Waldhaus. But he, the gentleman here too, ran hotels. But he died before the Waldhaus even came about, when my grandfather was but 19 years old. And when he died, he had 3 sons. And to each of his 3 sons, he bequeathed a pocket watch that he had gotten from a minor king who was a guest at his hotel. And since I'm the oldest in the direct line, I still have the watch from the King of Romania. This is one of my great-grandfathers, but not the one who built the Waldhaus. The builders of the Waldhaus were the parents of my grandmother. And they had been running hotels all their lives, but they weren't their own. And so finally, as they approached 60, they had this dream of building their own place, and that's what they did. And they put everything in it, that they had. I mean, all their money, of course, but also all their ideas about what a hotel should be like. And since they knew what they were doing, people ask about how it was to grow up in a place like that. I talked before about us being a bit like in a circus or on a farm, and it's true here too. We really grew up in the middle of it. In our family, I'm now 72, but in my childhood we didn't have a separate apartment. We just had a few rooms on the mezzanine floor. It was right in the middle of things. In a way, it was strange because we didn't really belong to anything. We were not guests, we were not staff, we were just kind of in between. But as a child, you just accept whatever you find. But for us, the greatest time was when the hotel was closed. We're still closed twice a year, in spring and in the fall, for like 6 or 7 weeks each. It's the time when we do construction work and when we catch up on everything we don't have time for in the season. But then really nobody's here. They put all the furniture away, cover it up with old sheets so it doesn't get dusty and so on. And for us as children, that was heaven, because you could run every place. You could play badminton in the great lounge. You could set out your train set with the straight rails as long as you could to see how fast it would go and everything. In the season, by contrast, you always had to watch out because people would say, you don't disturb our guests, and don't run this way, and don't come in here. There was a good reason for that. My parents had the same temptation that many hotel families have. If you have too much work, which you often do, you might tend to just tell your children, well, go and get some ice cream from the pastry chef and then come back again, or go and watch TV. Well, we didn't have TV at the time. Anyway, you try to distract your children by the luxury that the guests have. But my parents were very careful not to make us feel like guests, because they didn't think it would be good for us to grow up that way. That doesn't mean that the guests are in trouble, but it's something else when you're in a place for a vacation or when it's your life. This is the smoker's lounge. You used to be able to smoke all over the building, and probably longer than in America. But over time, of course, that became unlawful and also unreasonable. But then it wasn't easy to find a room in the hotel that could be dedicated to the smokers. And in the end, we decided to build one. And this little cabinet was actually for that. Next to this room, there is the reading room, the library also. Although our library, to be honest, is all over the place. I think we have about 3,800 books by last count, because there are many guests at the Waldhaus who know how to read and write, and some even do it. In any case, it's like flotsam from the long history of the hotel. On the way, let's take a look at the kitchen. My great-grandparents, who had the hotel built for them, they had not just wanted to invest in a hotel, but hotels were their life. They had always worked in hotels, and it still shows. It's not just in front of the house that it's impressive, but also back of the house. In a hotel, there's always an ongoing fight between the practical and the aesthetic. And of course, it's practical to have these covers for the plates on top of the buffet where you hand out the food. Food is an important part of a vacation, obviously. And that's a difference too to a city hotel, for instance, that most people who stay here also take a meal plan. We still call that half pension by the old name. Full pension used to be with lunch, but few people will take lunch anymore. But almost everybody who stays here will eat dinner here. In terms of the food, it's quite a challenge. Like if you have 200 or 250 guests, in a restaurant you may have a specific menu catering to specific tastes, and people can choose whether they come there or not. In a hotel with half pension, you also have to have menus that have a broad appeal, and so they usually have to make sure that they have a lot of choices and a lot of flexibility. We have, I think, 25 or 26 chefs. This is our second dining room, and when the hotel is not entirely full, we can also use it for functions. And so all our own parties of our family were here too. So we started calling it the wedding room. And I always tell people that I knew where I was going to celebrate my marriage before I knew with whom. And actually I did celebrate it here. Many years ago, my wife and I spent a few days at the Greenbrier. It was at the end of May or so. So it was a time where, like here, many families met, and you really had the feeling that there were people there who had been there for generations. It's a different place from here and much bigger. And of course it has a much longer history, but it was a little bit of the same idea, it seemed. By the way, we spend a lot of money trying to keep the corridors as they are or to restore them. Nobody comes here for the corridors, but it's very much part of how an old building feels. These public areas are important for that. That used to be for calling the maid if you needed some service. In every room there was a button that you could press, and then contact would be interrupted, and the number of your room would appear in one of those squares, and then they would know that they could that you needed some attention. It doesn't work anymore, but meaning it's not needed anymore because people will call on the phone. But we didn't want to do away with it because it's part of the old corridors. The funny thing was, it was also for public communication. You could, from downstairs, from the concierge, you could ring this bell in all the floors. And if you rang it once, it was for the porter, for carrying the luggage, coming downstairs. If you rang twice, it was for my mom. And if you rang 3 times, it was for my dad. And in the middle of the season, it would ring all the time. And sometimes people would innocently walk through the hallway, and then it would ring, and you could see them jump because they were startled. You can see that it looks different because originally it wasn't meant for the guests. But by now, of course, these are the most prized rooms because people want to be at the top. It doesn't make sense to go up here, but you see, we still, in one of the towers, we still have staff bedrooms. This is a very modest room. It's small, it's just for one person, and we still have a whole series of such rooms. As you can see, it's not just old, but we've redone it. We've actually set it up quite recently. But then you also kind of choose your guests that way. What about maybe an old lady who's been coming here for many years, but doesn't have much money anymore, and yet she would like to spend 3 summer weeks at the Waldhaus. If you only have a big room, either you're unfair and you give it to her for a much smaller price, or you have something that is more in line with her budget. And that's what we actually have. You're looking straight north, and these mountains, they're not terribly high. They're about 10, 11,000 feet, but they are the continental divide between north and south. We really get the weather from the south. Like, it could be all different on the other side. It could be snowing there, and it could be sunny here. So here's the florist. That you're here at the wrong time, because at the moment we get flowers like everybody else from the big suppliers. But in summer there's a gardener up here, not too far from here, and then you really get local flowers. I mean, obviously now you can't. The flowers next to me, that's a nice part, one of the many nice parts of our life here. By luck, we have a very good florist who's been working here for about a quarter of a century at least. And every week she tries to find new ideas, new flowers, new decorations. Switzerland is a mixed country in terms of faith. There are Catholic regions, there are Protestant regions. Obviously today there are many who have neither faith, but in any case, in many ways, we're all Puritans, whether we're Catholic or Jewish or faithless or what. And that Puritan streak you can also see at the Waldhaus. It's a luxury hotel, but it's not an opulent one. And the same, hopefully, is true for our flowers. away from home. It's a nice word, but a tricky one actually. I always feel that if it became too much of a home, maybe then people would think it wasn't necessary to come anymore. I mean, if it's like home, why should you come? But seriously speaking, it is a part of many people's lives. People often ask us, how many regular guests do you have? Like what percentage or so? But the fact is, you cannot really define that, because if you think of your own life, there may be places that you only visit every 12, 15 years. You've only seen 2 or 3 times in your life, but they really became part of your life. I mean, if you've been to Paris or to London or to Rome, that somehow becomes part of your world. And there are quite a few people who do not visit us that often, but for whom the Waldhaus is very much part of their world. There are others who come 10 times a year. Of course, there it's obvious, but you cannot define it so easily. Home away from home? Well, yes, as long as you come, that's all right with me. Thank you for your visit. I hope you come back.
Thanks for watching. Go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content and shopping guides.